to Orca Watch Live with Robin Petch.
Hello everyone, welcome to day 6 of Orca Watch Live. As always, we're going to start with a thank you to our sponsors. With many sponsors and supporters that have made this possible. The big one, of course, is NatureScot, who've helped to fund this project through their PlungeIn the Coasts and Waters Community Fund. We have a number of partners in the local community, and we'll hear from some of them tomorrow. Tomorrow's programme will include a visit to the schools, for example, and we'll hear from some of the locals around the John O'Groats area too. So thank you to the local community for all your support. Our accommodation partners probably expected a few more visitors to the area by this time when we first planned the event, but they've given us stalwart support this year and many of them in previous years too, and some are already lining up for next year. So thank you to our official accommodation partners. Many collaborators, of course, key amongst them the Orkney Marine Mammal Research Initiative, Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust, Orcadian Wildlife, Shetland Orca Sightings, Shetland Wildlife, and the Caithness and Moray-Firth Cetacean Sightings Group. Thank you for your collaboration. And last but not least, our correspondents on the ground. Lucy, our on-site volunteer coordinator, Steve and Riley, our Sea-Watch volunteer, Emma from Omri in Orkney, Claire, our regional coordinator, and Karen, that you'll be hearing from shortly, our regional coordinator for Shetland. Thank you to them too. Okay, let's move on and have a look at our sightings I'm jumping ahead there. We don't need to do the sightings yet. Yeah, absolutely. We need to have a quick look what we're going to be seeing in the rest of the week. Orca Watch Live tonight, of course, and tomorrow, a special on Saturday night. Julia Sutherland talking about the ecological consequences of orca predation on seals. And finally, another one not to be missed, Orca Watch Live on Sunday is our roundup of the week. All of the things that we've seen, looking back at the highlights, meeting some of the people again, and looking forward to National Whale and Dolphin Watch and Orca Watch 2022. Tonight then, sightings news in just a moment. I've tried to jump the gun there. Then we're going to meet some of our correspondents. I'm going to have a little chat at 8 o'clock about photography and choosing a camera, because there was a lot of talk last night between our experts on the merits of various cameras. We had quite a few questions which didn't get answered. So I thought it'd be worth just spending 10 minutes just having a little look from my point of view of the cameras you might look at. Please keep the questions coming in, because at 8:15 we will have some questions and answers. We have a few that we parked from last night. But if you do have any questions during the course of this evening, use your YouTube chat or email us, orcawatchonline2021@gmail.com. Okay. So now we will have a look at the sightings updates for Thursday, the 3rd of June, but we're looking back, of course, at yesterday. And for reasons that will become apparent in a moment, I've kept Ryan's wonderful picture of the 12s pod up with the little calf. I could have done a picture of the 169 pod. However, first of all, let's have a quick look at the sightings map, which has been updated today. And as you can see, we have sightings dotted all around the place. Over in the Hebrides, it's really been quite a busy day yesterday for harbour porpoises. Lots of porpoise sightings. Our partners over there on some of the wildlife companies, you'll see all the full names listed both in my blog and on the sightings maps. But a number of the trips out there were picking up harbour porpoises, and our regional coordinator from Norfolk, Carl Chapman, is on a tour in that area, and he also picked up a minke whale there. One of the Hebridean boats is actually in the Moray-Firth at the moment, and they picked up minkies and harbour porpoises up there in the Cromarty area. And Alan Airy, one of our long-standing observers in the Moray-Firth, watched some harbour porpoises. Lucy saw some seals around Duncansby Head yesterday, actually from the ferry on the way to Orkney. But the big news of the day, apart from Karen's sighting of harbour porpoises, and we do keep saying the harbour porpoises get a bad press, really. They're sort of little quiet, shy things that, unfortunately for them, are predated on even by orca sometimes. The bottlenose dolphins beat them up. They struggle in inshore waters because of pollution and our other activities. So they're absolutely lovely creatures. They might not be spectacular, but they're well worth watching. So let's give a nice shout out to the harbour porpoises. But what we're looking for, of course, is orca. And look at the dots around the Shetland yesterday. Shetland had some great sightings. So we're going to move on, have a little look at the tables, just to put a little bit of detail in to those sightings. As we said, Alan Airy saw the harbour porpoise around Covesea, Hebridean Adventures, Red Moon Cruises, Hebridean Whale Cruises, our partners at the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust, lots of sightings of harbour porpoises in various places, but minke whale too from Hebridean Whale Cruises around Melvaig there yesterday. Also, on that sighting map, we'll see in a moment, have been some sightings of the 169s. Now, I'm not sure who the photographer of this is. I'm not sure whether Hannah took this herself. She's been very busy and out and about today. But Hannah Thompson's actually a friend of mine from Whitby in Yorkshire. She gave my friend Brian, that runs the boats there, a heads up that she'd seen orca. And they're the same group of orca that Karen's going to talk about in a minute. The first reporting yesterday was Karen. But actually Hannah had seen them about an hour earlier, as we can see there from Sombra Head 5, and she was able to actually identify there was a bull female and 2 of the calves, and Hugh and Karen Monroe managed to identify them as the 169s. Karen, as I say, reported them yesterday. We teased it on Orca Watch Live last night, but they've had an earlier sighting, as I say, by Hannah. Karen also saw those porpoises a bit later. But those same orca were picked up later at Bigton and Maywick, as you see there. Martina Smith, Susan Melville picked them up again. Robbie Brooks picked up some orca that may have been the 12s at Muckleflugger. I don't know if Karen's going to have an update for us on that. We'll find out in just a moment. And there is Carl's minke whale sighting. So we mentioned Karen. I know she's there waiting for us to perhaps talk about these sightings. So let's see if we can get to Karen live, still at Sombra Head. Hello, Karen.
Yes, hello, Robin. It's nice to be outside and actually taking advantage of a rare sunny day in Shetland.
Yeah. Can I just ask, Karen, now this is a little personal question. Did you actually meet my friend Hannah Thompson there, who sighted the orca about an hour or so before you did?
No, I never actually got to see them yesterday. She was out with some friends at Sombra Head and put the call out. And at the time, Sombra Head was actually in thick fog, and she only saw them because they were close into the cliffs. And she managed to grab that, which was pretty handy, because otherwise we'd have no idea who they were. And then a few of us rushed down to sit various places we thought they might come, and sit and watch in the fog and the swell to see if we could actually see them, but no luck. But fortunately, she managed to get a photo, and Hugh and Karen Monroe had a look at it, and yes, it is indeed the 169s. Yeah. And the animal in that picture was 170 and her calf.
Aha, lovely. Yeah, I've been trying to get in touch with her today. I know she's been out and about, so that's great confirmation that it was her photograph. That's super.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on to a little later in the day. As you've just said, it was we've put on the table less than optimal sea state and visibility, but they were around at Sombra for an hour or two, I gather, before moving on altogether, I think.
Well, it was hard to tell. I mean, sometimes when they're around Sombra Head, they can do that annoying thing and just sit offshore a wee bit, and you don't quite know what they're doing. Or they can go around Fitful Head and just take their time getting around Fitful Head. So you end up sitting for hours hoping that you've made the right gamble. But obviously last night we were sitting in live when the news came in that they'd made it around to the west side of South Mainland of Shetland and were seen off Bigton. So it was like, oh, right, okay, that's where they are. And then seen a bit heading further north, but still quite far offshore.
Right, so Bigton's right round the other side of the island.
Yeah, so if it's over, maybe it is I'm trying to think how many miles it is, but it's not particularly far. But it's yeah, they're on sort of working their way north again, I think.
Right, and then later on, still at Maywick, is that close to Bigton, or is that a distance again as well?
No, that's a bit further than Bigton, a bit further north. And again, they were still far off, but they were doing a bit of sort of spy hopping and sort of just generally milling around. So quite often in the evening, you see them sort of chilling out, if you like.
Aha. Can we have a little look around at Sumba, seeing as you're there? We keep talking about Sumba, but people probably don't really know. Can you just give us a quick scan around with your camera phone?
So there's the lighthouse.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see if I can angle it down onto some of the cliffs. We're waiting for the puffins to come back in. Then looking across right into the sun there, Fitful, and then to Sunbury Airport and Compass Head, which are all good vantage points.
Fabulous place to watch from.
Yeah.
Now, while we've got you captive there, and I know you want to go off and watch again, so I won't keep you much longer, but we had a few questions last night came in when we were having the discussion about the amazing catalogue that you and the team have worked on. And there were a number of questions came up. So if I can just quickly throw them at you now, and if we have to park them again for later, so be it. But it was someone called Stuart Baxter had a number of questions which led on one from the other. What first one was, is there any evidence that the orca come here to mate, or at least that they mate while they're here? And is this why members of pods are seen mixing with each other, with different pods?
Well, that's a interesting question. I don't think we really been through the knowledge that there has some activist behaviour. So presumably something going on, and we certainly do see, some pods that are here all year round, or can be seen every month of the year. So you would think that they've got to mate at some point. So it's highly probable that they are mating in UK waters.
Yeah, but we've not actually observed mating behaviour as such, but we're assuming that they do.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, maybe more drone work might open up some more of that, evidence, shall we say.
The other question is, what are the typical hunting behaviours that are seen by the pods that visit the UK? So, I mean, we know that they hunt herring and we know that they hunt seals, but are there any particular behaviours that you can comment on?
Well, they're quite resourceful and opportunistic, the pods we see. So some of the pods, I would say they're quite different when we see the Icelandic pods. They tend to be further offshore, and then they will come in just occasionally, but they'll cut across bays, and rather than things like the 64, 65s and 27s, who are just absolutely meticulous about going around coastline, sniffing out seals. And I would say the 27s in particular, just this year actually, we've noticed a particular hunting strategy that worth more investigation, where they basically go in formation down mussel lines. So this is mussels that are growing outside big sort of lines, and it looks a bit like I guess a swimming pool if you imagine lanes up, and they've taken to going down them and as if they were doing a swimming race, blowing bubbles to try and flush out seals that might be hiding in the mussel lines. So that's been quite interesting to watch, that they've learned that.
That is interesting. And Stuart's final question is, do the Scottish orcas have the same dialects as the Icelandic pods, for example? Well, some of the Scottish orca, of course, are Icelandic orca as well, but do they all have the same dialect, or are there variants? Have we studied that yet?
Well, again, not very much work done in Scotland yet, but there is actually a recent paper by Anna Selblin and et al. When I believe Anna's, Anna from
I do
previous...
know Anna, yes. Yeah.
And also collaborating on that paper was Volker Deek, who did quite a lot of work up in Shetland with Andy Foote, and got some recordings here. And Philippa, of course, who we heard from on Saturday. And,
Yes.
they analysed a whole load of calls. There's not very many from Shetland or Scotland yet, but they did find sort of links between Shetland and Iceland, which is not surprising because, as you say, we now know there are quite strong links between the orca that are in Shetland and in Iceland. But they also analysed all the calls that they had with Norway as well, and they found no links between Iceland, Norway or Shetland. So that's quite interesting as well, because if you remember last night we were discussing that there hadn't been, at this point in time, there's not been any evidence of our sightings turning up in Norway or vice versa.
It is a fascinating study, and as we've said repeatedly this week, every time we find something out, it just leads us to need to find out something else again. So it's there's plenty of work still to do. Yeah, I mean, for listeners who weren't there with us, you can still hear Philippa's talk, of course. You can still buy tickets for that first Saturday night evening of talks. So if you haven't done so, you can do that. I think the first thing we'll do, Karen, though, is let you go, because it looks a lovely evening there, and I'm sure you'd like to be looking out to sea.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to plan before the haar comes in again.
That's great. Thanks so much again for being with us, and especially for answering the questions as well. And I'm sure it won't be the last time.
All right. Okay, see you later. Bye.
Thanks as always, Karen. Yeah, for viewers who missed the original reference, Anna Seldman, who's leading on that paper and studying the communications there with the orca and the dialects. Anna was a student of Peter Evans, our director. She was an intern with Sea-Watch Foundation. And I first met her after that working on whale watching companies in Iceland. So I know people have asked us questions about, how can you get involved? One way of doing it is working for wildlife companies as a guide or an observer, volunteering, becoming an intern with organisations like the Sea-Watch Foundation. And you never know where it's going to lead. Anyway, let's have a quick look back through the rest of the sightings. Yep. Let's bring that back up again. And so, moving on. These are the orca that were seen at Muckleflugga on Unst. I love the name of that place, Muckleflugga at Unst. Believed to possibly be from the 12s pod, but that's yet to be confirmed, I think, as we speak. But Robbie very kindly shared these photographs with us. These were taken around 10 o'clock at night, so you can actually see the sun setting on the water. Just lovely, lovely images. Sightings for today, at the time that I put this together, consist of 2 harbour porpoises. Now, you will remember when we finished last night doing the sightings, we didn't have much either, and look how it grew. So we'll see. By the time we get to tomorrow, we might have a little bit more to share with you than we have right now. So as we don't have a lot more sightings, I'm just very quickly going to take you through the app. I did promote this a couple of nights back, but for those of you who've been getting in touch and saying, how can we get involved reporting sightings? Well, we do have an online form on the Sea-Watch website. We do have paper forms that you can send in. But actually, increasingly, our Sea-Watch app, which is available free, is a good way to send us in sightings and learn about the animals that you might see. Developed in partnership, as it says there, with CCAMS at Bangor University, Nova Innovation, and with funding from the European Regional Development Fund. And it is available for either Android or iOS, and it is available to use on a tablet or a phone. So I've shown you 2 screenshots here, how it looks on my iPad, how it looks on my Samsung Android phone. Exactly the same titles, just in slightly different places. And each day you'll have a species of the day with a fact sheet, which will pop up. And you can use it to submit a sighting. You might just be walking somewhere, you see something, as people have been this week, and you just want to send us a sighting. You can click on that, and it will take you through step by step. Very easy to actually submit them. You can do an organised survey, as a lot of our observers are doing, of course, sitting in a place for a timed watch over a period of time. There are video guides on there, so you can learn about the different species that you might see. You saw one of those, the orca film, in my talk earlier in the week. And there is also the species pack, 35 different species with all the facts and information you could ever need. And all of this is free. You can download this at any time from the usual app stores. Very, very, very useful resource. And then once you do start submitting sightings, you can look back at the sightings you've submitted. You can also look at everybody else's and see what there is around. So this, of course, only shows things entered via the app. We do, as I say, have an online sightings form. At some point, the next stage will be to merge the two databases, but at the moment, those are separate. So this is how you would submit a sighting. You'd click on submit a sighting, and you'll then have a list of things to look at. What did you see? What species was it? And then when you click on that, it will bring up those fact sheets again, and you can scroll through until you identify what it is that you saw. And then just click on the image, and that sighting is entered. You then tell us how certain you were it was, and so on. If you're doing a survey, when you click on start a survey, you can organize a walking survey, a fixed point survey, or start a boat survey. And when you first start a watch, you just the position you are in is located automatically by the GPS in your device. Put your name in, how high you are above the sea, whether you're on a boat or on land. And of course, once you've done this once, that information will be there the next time. If you've changed, you can change it, but otherwise that's a once only job if you're watching from the same place. Here's an example of the species and video guides. So as I say, you can click on a video and watch some information about that animal, see its behaviours, learn about it, and the fact sheets on the right there will tell you more. There are also distribution maps, so we've seen some of these in the talks. Gives you an idea of where the different species are most likely to be seen at different times of year. And this is, for obvious reasons, for the killer whale. And if it's in a bright red area, it's highly prevalent at that point. If it's a blue area, it's an unlikely sighting. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's much less likely. And here's the bit at the end where you can look at your submissions, find out about what other people have seen, or go back and remind yourself about all of the data you've entered. And that one on the left there, the 17, is my sightings from last September, August and September, mainly of minke whales on the Yorkshire coast. On the right there, they're included in those red heat maps, but as you can see, lots of other places where various species are seen, and you can drill down into that to find out more. So if you'd like to download that, as I say, it is a completely free download, but of course it does come at a cost to us to organize all of that, to create the app and to analyze and deal with the data. And one way you can support us, of course, is by becoming a member. The other thing, do look at the bottom of your feed, and there is a link to our PayPal account where you can make a donation. Okay, time for us to move on to the next part of our talk, and we're going to meet some of our supporters and our people on the ground. And we'll start off with, we have a lovely photo from Claire Boardman, our coordinator up in that part of the world. And this is her team that's helping with the watching at the moment. As you can see behind there, they're not looking at the sea too closely right now, and you can't really blame them. From left to right, I have my information here. We have Joe Taggart, Jackie Osborne, Zoe Doran, Claire Boardman, and Pauline Robertson. Also want to give a shout out to Leah Nicole and Nigel Mansfield. They came as well, but they're not in the picture. And they're all down there at John O'Groats in that image, and they're waiting for the ferry to come in. Well, they'll have trouble finding it until it's quite close by the look of that image. Okay, we've got a short clip which Claire filmed earlier in the week to tell us all about herself and what she does.
Hi there, my name's Claire. I'm the regional coordinator for the Sea-Watch Foundation for the north and northeast of Scotland. I live in a small village called Brough, which is very close to, or not, pretty close to John O'Groats. I do watches from our back garden because we look out onto the Pentland Firth over towards Hoy and Orkney. I also go up to Dunnet Head, do some watches up there, as well as Duncansby and a couple of small bays in between. Hopefully this year, obviously with the COVID restrictions, I'll get a couple of locals together, get them out doing watches for us in various locations. I also have a few others further along the north coast towards Strathy and Betty Hill that can hopefully do some watches for us as well. I'm also, as you can see, I got my nice Orca Watch hat on, my beanie on, which you may need because the weather is not the greatest up here at the moment. It's a little bit chilly still. I was lucky enough to see the orcas earlier this week at Duncansby. They had travelled up from the east coast. One pod in particular that stopped at Freswick Bay had actually killed 3 seals, so they were obviously hungry. The rest that we saw weren't really hunting, they just seemed to be travelling quite fast. They did have a calf with them. I managed to get a glimpse of them at Duncansby Head, and then I travelled on to Hoona, where I saw them at Hoona. They travelled on to Strathy Point, but then we lost them because the mist came in. So there have been quite a few sightings of orca up here already. Hopefully anybody coming up on holiday, if you do want to take place in doing some watches for us, being a citizen scientist, let us know. I'll certainly be getting people involved from our campsite. We've got quite a few coming up to stay, so I'll be getting them out to do watches. Apart from that, hopefully, we'll meet some more people with the Orca Watch online that we're doing with the evening sessions, evening talks, meet some new people, share sightings, and hope to see you all there. Thank you very much. And next year, perhaps we will see more people in person at Duncansby for Orca Watch 2022. Thank you. Bye.
I certainly hope Claire's right. I'm thoroughly enjoying leading Orca Watch Live from home. Very comfortable, I have to say, and hope you'll agree. It's been a fabulous week so far, but it would be nice to get up there and actually be there amongst all of the action. Now, Claire does a wonderful job for us as regional coordinator up there, but with Orca Watch and so many people around and so much to do, we recruited a few extra volunteers. One of those is Lucy Baldwin, and we have a short clip of Lucy too.
Hi everyone, my name is Lucy and I've been a volunteer with Sea-Watch Foundation for a few years now. I volunteered at Orca Watch back in 2019 and I'm here again to volunteer in 2021. So this year for the event I'm going to be based at John O'Groats in Caithness, and throughout the week I'm going to be conducting land watches mainly from Duncansby Head, but I'm also going to be collecting data on the John O'Groats ferry. But my main role this year as a volunteer is going to be to help with the organisation and collation of data. So that's going to be mainly land watch data, and that's going to be from across the mainland, on Orkney and Shetland, so everywhere that Orca Watch runs. So it's going to be my job to make sure that at the end of the day, all of the data is in one place. So all of the land watch forms, along with any media, so any pictures, videos, sightings reports, any other exciting stuff from the day, is all collected in one place. And that means that can be used in daily reports, daily blogs, that we can use it in our online sessions throughout the week, and also that it's all in one place so that after the event we can use it going forward and the organisation has all of the data that they need. So I'll be doing that alongside other volunteers on the mainland and on Orkney and Shetland too. Alongside that, I'm just going to be on hand for newer volunteers to help with any questions or queries with surveying or anything kind of to do with Orca Watch. So that will be my role throughout the event. So fingers crossed for some really good sightings, and I'm looking forward to seeing lots of people online throughout the week to enjoy it with us. So see you there.
And I have to say, Lucy is doing an absolutely fabulous job for us. It is quite time consuming to collecting all of the data and pass it on. As I say, we have a number of ways that we're collecting it. If you remember, have a look online. We have our breaking news sightings, which are reported as they come in. As people enter sightings through our main sightings page and they are cleared by our other volunteers, they will appear on the verified sightings. And then Lucy has to coordinate all of the paper forms, pass them on to Kiara, and she and her team, including the interns, have to put all of that data in. So there's a massive amount of work going on behind the scenes, and Lucy is really helping to streamline that. So thank you, Lucy. We're going to have a quick look at the weather now. This was going to be the point where we were going to talk about today's sightings briefly, but there only are those harbour porpoises from Mossbank in Shetland for today. Hopefully more by tomorrow. So let's just have a look at the weather and hope that it's going to help us find things. Well, the good news is, in most parts of our main area, the winds are quite light. If you remember, we said we like to have winds of well, ideally completely still, but if anything of 5 knots or less is absolutely fabulous. And as you can see, there's a lot of dark blue areas, which is very light winds. Even the pale blue areas are really good. So large parts of the Moray Firth and most of the north coast, Orkney, nice, little bit breezier though around Shetland. And you can see there that there's the blues going into green and quite dark green. So we're pushing the winds between 15 and 20 knots in Shetland tomorrow, but the rest of the area looks pretty sound. So fingers crossed that that's correct. Let's have a look at the visibility. And one of the problems when you don't have wind is that you might have fog. And as you can see, sitting right on the north coast of Scotland and the southern end of Orkney, we do have a bit of a patch of poor visibility. The purpley colour and the red is less than 2 or 3 kilometres of visibility. Also the southern end of Shetland as well. So important viewing areas are going to be potentially shrouded in mist for at least part of the day, quite low visibility further on. So let's again hope that that turns out not to be right. And the swell, we want the pale colours to have little or no swell. So as usual, Hebrides fairly sheltered, not too bad in the inshore waters in the north of Scotland there, and including Orkney, but we get up to probably a metre of swell in some parts, and then some heavier swell off the east coast of Shetland. Fingers crossed then, let's just hope that that weather is better than is forecast. At least the wind's going to be good, but as I say, sometimes when there's very light winds, that's when the haar sets in. Okay, now last night we had some very good questions came in, and one question that sparked quite a lot of debate amongst the team responsible for the Orca photo identification catalogue, the Scottish catalogue, was about camera equipment. And we had some subsequent questions. So I've spent a little bit of time today putting together just a very quick personal look at camera equipment, just to give you a little bit of a guide. Some people would have followed the discussion quite well, but others may not have been entirely sure what all the different camera types that were being discussed were. So I'm just going to give you my guide to choosing a camera. I do want to stress that it is a personal guide, and actually choosing a camera is a very personal thing. And I'm going to look at some key questions that you might want to ask yourself. But just to set the scene, just so you've got some idea when I show you my camera equipment, I don't claim to be a brilliant photographer by any means. I'm a naturalist first and foremost, as well as being an educator. But over the years, I have helped and contributed to photo ID work. I make slides for my own presentations and things. There are much better photographers than I am. However, I would suggest that most people would probably be very happy with the pictures I managed to take with my kit. And this is why it's a personal choice. So these are my pictures from Canada of orca that I saw there from the northern resident community, and of the big killer whales, male and female. The picture I showed earlier of the orca breaching, having just killed a seal, coming back into the water. This is a picture I took from the deck of a cruise ship of a common dolphin on a very, very still day, as you can see. Now, I love that photograph. Most people would be very, very happy with it. That probably wouldn't be good enough to put in a magazine. It's not quite sharp enough. It's not quite crisp enough. If you had more expensive camera gear than mine, that photograph would be even better. But I think that's pretty good, though I say it myself. My humpback whale. This was taken at Cabo San Lucas from a whale watching trip. That was taken about 2 miles away from Whitby in the North Sea, believe it or not. We do get still water. I'm pretty happy with that one. I'm going to show you my wife's camera as well, just to sort of compare. And this is a picture she managed to take of a Nazca booby. She uses a bridge camera. You heard Karen talk about bridge cameras. I'll show you that in just a moment. Again, it wouldn't be magazine quality. A really expensive camera would provide even sharper images than that. But I would suggest for most people's uses, we'd be happy with that picture. This one is really probably verging on magazine quality, taken with Chris's bridge camera, a very good bridge camera. And I will say, I'll be quite honest about it, sometimes with Chris's bridge camera, she gets better photographs than I do with my SLR. And this is a case in point. I didn't get as good a picture as that on that particular trip. This is taken from Harbour Breeze Cruises in Los Angeles. So before you choose your camera, you need to ask yourself some key questions. That, by the way, is my old camera. It's the older model to the one that I have now. And that's a 70-300 Nikon lens that I'm using with that camera. A cheaper lens than the one I have now, but actually a very good compromise. I agree entirely with what they said yesterday. Ideally 100-400 or even up to 500. But a 300 lens is lighter than a 400 lens. So if that's an issue for you, a good 70-300 lens is not a bad compromise. And you heard the guys say that if the whales come closer, you want to be able to get a slightly wider view. And this lens, you can widen out to 70. The big lenses, you're probably 100 or 150. So you've got, sort of twice the zoom or twice the width to get the whale into if you have the smaller lens, depending which way around you look at it. So the key questions you need to ask are, how good a photographer are you? And also with that, how good a photographer do you want to be? Because one thing I can absolutely promise you is just buying a big camera is not going to make you a better photographer. You are going to have to learn how to use that camera. And the more expensive your camera is, generally, the more complicated it is to use if you want to make the best use of it. Because once you start using a good SLR camera, all of those auto settings that you love on your smaller cameras, you're not going to be wanting to use those. Otherwise, there was no point buying such a good camera. So think carefully about how much you want to get into photography and learn the art. Big question, how much do you want to spend? Do you want to get a camera that's going to cost you less than a couple of £100? Or seriously, do you want to spend £20,000 on your camera equipment? or 30 or 40. Because if you look at the big bags of equipment that the professionals carry around with them, that's what they've got in their bag. Everything in between is possible. How much weight do you want to carry around? Again, the team talked about this last night. Karen prefers her bridge camera because it's easily portable. And as Steve said, running across a field to get to the place, Karen's going to get there first with her light camera long before Steve with his bag full of heavy gear gets there. If you're lugging it around on the deck of a boat or a ship all day, carrying it across hills and dales to get to where you want to be, the weight's a really big important thing. And also when you're using it, it's important. My wife used to use an SLR. Unfortunately, she has problems with her neck and shoulders. That's why she went to the bridge camera. But actually, she's been delighted with the results and has no desire to go back to SLRs, even if her neck and her shoulders improve. And then finally, there is a huge debate to be had about the type of camera. And I'm not going to get into this in a big way today. The single lens reflex camera traditionally is the way to go. You've got a very clear viewfinder, interchangeable lenses. You can pick exactly the lens you want. Mirrorless is the new technology, and I'll be quite honest, I know very little about it. I haven't used it. It is taking over from SLR, but there is quite a price differential. Again, it's an expensive new technology, but there's some really nice advantages. And one of the big advantages of mirrorless is it's considerably lighter than the SLR is, and it uses some of the clever technology of bridges as well. Bridge cameras, your lens and your camera are all built as one. It has some of the features of an SLR, much more flexible than the ordinary compact camera. I'm not going to really look at compact cameras. I'm particularly going to compare the SLR and the bridge. So there was lots of talk last night about Canon cameras. And there's no question they're excellent. I am a Nikon user, but Hugh's, a big fan of the Canons, and he's not wrong. They are a superb option. If I could have afforded to buy it, this is the setup I originally wanted to buy. It was a Canon 5D with 100 to 400 lens. But I then found that was going to cost me nearly £5,000 to do that. At least it would now with the Mark IV body. Back then, I think it was about 4 when I looked at it. And as they did say, you can actually buy second-hand cameras, the older models, and save some money. But if you want the latest 5D, the Mark IV, with the latest 100 to 400 lens, you are looking at needing to spend that sort of money. And that was beyond my reach for what I need my camera for. So I settled on this, and I'm very, very happy with it. I originally had the 7000 and the 7100. I now have the 7200. I have not bothered upgrading to the 7500 because it doesn't give me enough difference to justify that money. I have upgraded my Nikon 7300 lens to this very nice Tamron 100-400, which gives me the longer reach. And it's actually weather sealed. Hugh mentioned about looking at lenses and cameras that are weather sealed. Again, that's a more expensive option if you're going to get something which is water resistant. All cameras and lenses will take, a minimum amount of a little bit of damp, but over time, it will wear them out. And if you're on a boat getting splashed, if you're out in the rain, then you do need to look at weather sealing. My camera isn't. The lens, to some extent, is, but it's not fully weather sealed. As you've seen, I've taken some really nice pictures with it, and it's still around 1,500 quid to get a setup like that. If you're looking at semi-professional level, a bit less than semi-professional, expert amateur, if you like, really, this is, in my opinion, the best balance of the quality of the equipment and the price. But other people would argue with me. That's my opinion. That was my pick. As I said, I would have liked the more expensive Canon option. But this is a good option as far as I'm concerned. If you wanted to get the older model and a second-hand lens, you could probably get the same setup for round about £1,000. This is my wife's camera. This is the RX10 Mark IV, which is widely regarded, and it's why we bought it. We actually bought it in the Sony shop in Tokyo at a discount because we could get the tax-free and everything while we were there. But here in the UK, you're looking at £1,500 for this. So it's the same price as my camera. What do you get for that, paying that same money? You get a much lighter camera and you get a much bigger zoom and you get everything built in. And she loves it. And you've seen some of the pictures that she's taken with it. There are other bridge cameras, but if you read the reviews, this is the one that everybody recommends. Really good clear viewfinder, really fast responses, good zoom, and just really, really good quality photographs. There is a Mark III. This is the Mark IV. There is a Mark III. If you wanted something like that and you don't mind going second hand, you can get those for under £700. It's not quite as quick as this. It's not quite as sharp as this, but it's still a very, very good camera for the money. So it's an option. And this is where size does matter. I've just shown the 3 cameras that we have in use for comparison. There is my SLR on the right. There is my wife's still quite chunky bridge camera in the middle. And there is the old FZ45, which Chris used to use. Now, the smaller you go, obviously, the lighter it is, but you've still got a 24 times zoom on that. So you've got a really good zoom. You have got a viewfinder, which I think is quite important. It's quite difficult to do whale and dolphin photography, and certainly bird photography, trying to look at the screen on the back of the camera to take your picture, especially on a sunny day. So my tip, my personal tip would be, whatever you do buy, if you're serious about doing any sort of wildlife photography, you need a viewfinder to look through, not just a screen on the back. And you pay your money, you take your choice. That little FZ45 is still a really nice little camera. The viewfinders are nothing like as good as the newer ones, and certainly nothing like as good as an SLR. So if it's a grey day, if you're struggling to find your target, the viewfinders on the smaller bridge cameras are not as bright and sharp. And there's a little bit of a delay because it's an electronic view. With a SLR, you're looking right the way through at the real thing. However, how much money do you want to spend? It goes back to what I said at the beginning. You can get a perfectly decent picture that you'll probably be happy with on a good mobile phone these days, or on a one of the budget compact cameras. If you look it, you're in the right place at the right time. You don't have to spend this sort of money. But you're looking at £150 on the left, you're looking at £1,500 in the middle and on the right. If you want the really good setups, you're looking at needing to spend 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000. I don't know what Hugh and Steve's cameras, for example, cost, but they would be more than that Canon setup I showed you at the beginning. You can't get that little FZ45 anymore. I just double checked today. The latest version of that is the FZ82, and that has very good reviews, I have to say. It's not going to be as good as Chris's. It's not going to be as good as my SLR, but actually it is a very, very capable bridge camera. And the beauty of bridge cameras is that you've got a very wide angle lens as well as a big zoom. And they're absolutely perfect for every situation. You can make things that are a long way away come close. If the animals come really close to the boat, then you've got a lens that's wide enough to deal with it. They've also generally got very good video capabilities as well. So if you want to spend a little bit more money, that might be one to have a look at. But I'm not trying to plug any particular brand or any particular make. We all have our favourites. Hugh was very honest about his love of Canon, but he was also very honest about all of the other brands that have good products too. And certainly Sony, Canon and Nikon have similar bridge cameras. Read the reviews would be my advice. Finally, so I want to quickly mention the Nikon P1000 for about £900. That's the camera that Stuart Baines, our Yorkshire coordinator, uses, Mr. Scarborough porpoise. And here's a picture he took of a harbour porpoise on the surface on a very grey day. That's why the image is a little bit grainy and grey. he still managed to get the shot. And it's you can see the cutout on the fin and everything. It's a very nice picture. He has got a lot of other sharper pictures than that, but that's the only one I had to hand. I just threw that one in quickly at the last minute to show you. But the P1000 is very capable as well. It's got a huge zoom. The zoom is so big that it's almost unusable because it's so difficult to find something. But it's a nice camera as another option if you wanted to spend less than you spend on the Sony that Chris has. Okay, so there you are. You pay your money, you take your choice. We have a number of cameras, obviously, at the charity, which we use at certain times. Different people have different cameras. It costs money to do it. So if you if you want to do it seriously and you're going to enjoy the photography, spend the money. If you're not, then look very seriously at getting a much cheaper option. You could still get some amazing photographs. Okay, just another shout out. Please do send us some questions in. I'm going to answer those questions in just a few minutes. But we're just going to have a little trailer now from the wonderful talk given by Philippa Samara on Saturday.
So orcas that are really specializing on feeding on herring should stay within Icelandic waters. So let's go now from this remote corner of Northeast Iceland all the way to Musa Sound in Shetland. We are now on the 31st of May of 2008, and a group of orca researchers is sitting at the local Orca Inn, and they've just ordered dinner when they get the call that there are orcas out on the water. They rush out, they don't eat their dinner, and this team is led by Andy Foote. They're really trying to understand a lot more about the orcas that occur in Shetland. And when they get to the scene, they find a group of orcas that is looking like they have just been hunting a seal. There's a lot of birds in the area. And the researchers set out to do the foundation of all orca research, which is, again, the photo ID.
Okay, if you did miss that amazing talk, which was part of our evening of talks, you can still actually get access to the evening of talks. It's the only event in Orca Watch that there is a cost for to help us fund the rest of the week. Basically, it's £6.50. You can look at the link for that on Eventbrite, and you can still book that and download the recording of that talk. If you saw it or if you've already paid for it and missed it, then that link is also still valid, so you can still go to it. Okay, well, we've had some very nice questions coming in, and I'll deal with them as quickly as I can, because we have actually got quite a lot. So forgive me if I look to the side. I need to read the chat here. So let me just start from here. I'll come to the whale questions in a minute. As we've just done the photography, let's try and look at some questions first. Okay, a question here from the Gmail. What setting do I use to capture a fast-moving whale or dolphin? Okay, well, a simple answer to that question, first of all, is if you've got a very basic camera and you're not sure about all the fancy settings and setting shutter speeds and apertures and all of those things, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, then it's you that I'm talking to. One tip I would have is most cameras in the scenes settings have a sports setting, and that's designed for, you know, catching your kid at sports day or catching the footballer about to kick the ball or whatever. And what that setting does is it sets a preference of a fast shutter speed. So if with a fast shutter speed, you actually freeze the action in place, so you don't get a blur. Now, the only problem with that is the faster the shutter speed, the less light comes into the camera. So all things being equal, you would then end up with a darker picture. So you can't just choose to set the fastest speed you possibly can, because then you won't get a photograph at all on a dull day. So it's always a balance between the speed of the shutter, in other words, the time that the little hole is open, and how big the hole is that lets the light in. And the faster the shutter speed is, the bigger that hole is. So an easy way to do that, if you don't understand what I'm saying is, if you choose the sports setting, that will do the best it can for you. So I know a lot of people have got some nice pictures doing that. Personally, on advice from professional and very skilled amateur photographer friends of mine, if you're into shutter speeds and apertures and things, my kind of minimum go-to setting that I always try to get is 1/1250th of a second, 1/1250, and I try to get 6.3 aperture if I can, 7.1 ideally. That would be my go-to for ordinary conditions. On a dull day, I might have to go to 5.6 and make a bigger hole to let more light in. Or I might have to slow the speed down and run the risk of having a blurred picture. But that's what I try to get as a minimum. What I would really like to try and get is about 1600 and 7.1 as my minimum. That would be a kind of target to be at. But all of that varies greatly with different cameras, and to some extent you've got to experiment with the particular camera you have. But that would be kind of where I would be looking. A fast speed to freeze the action, 1250 or 1600 if I can. Faster will freeze the action more. Now, the other thing I'll just say about aperture, and I don't want to start getting too technical because I know I'm going to lose a lot of people if I do, but it's not just as simple and straightforward as just making the hole bigger to let more light in. Because actually, if you want a really nice wide depth of field with a lot of detail in the background, you need that hole to be smaller. So if you're doing scenic photography, it's the other way around. If you're trying to take a lovely landscape, you have a slower shutter speed so that the shutter is open for longer, and you have a smaller hole to let the light in, and that means you get a much bigger depth of field. So it's striking a balance. If you have too wide an aperture, you might only get a little bit of the animal in focus sometimes. So, but simple answer, go to speed between 1250 and 1600 if you can. Minimum aperture if you can, 6.371, but your camera, you're going to have to vary that greatly depending on the conditions and what camera you have. ISO, somebody's asked a question about ISO. I'll answer that one quickly. How do you get the colors balanced? How do you work the ISO? You'll remember, those of you who are as old as I am, that we used to put films in cameras, and the film you normally bought was 100 ISA. Was it ISA then or ISO? I can never remember which way around it was, but anyway, the same thing essentially. If you wanted to use it on a slightly duller day, you bought 200 or 400 ISO film, but then it was a bit grainy. You didn't quite get the sharpness and the detail. You could even get 1000 and 1600, and it was horribly grainy. If you wanted even sharper pictures, and especially slides, you got 64 ISO. On digital cameras these days, it's slightly different because that's done electronically, and it's not as bad as it was in the days of film. So actually, if your ISO is going up to 200 or 300 or even more, it's not particularly grainy. Again, ideally, you want the low ISO numbers because, again, you'll get the best quality. But that's the third thing to bring into whether you get a good picture or not. Depending on the light conditions, you can actually set the ISO higher and higher and higher. And I actually have my camera, mine is sophisticated enough. Most SLRs will, but not some of the budget ones. Mine is sophisticated enough that I can actually set the things that I want in terms of aperture and shutter speed, and the camera will choose an ISO to make that possible. But if you do that and it gets too high, then that does start to introduce the graininess. But it does mean you can get pictures in really low light. I have taken pictures in what you would consider to be dark, and I just said that a grainy film might have been 1600, My camera can do 512,000 ISO. Now it's awfully grainy, but you can still sometimes actually see a whale or a dolphin in the dark if you take a picture on those settings. So it's a whole lecture. ISO, shutter speed, aperture is a whole lecture, but I hope that's given people at least some idea of the things to think about. Pat on Gmail had a question about GPS. Is it true that some cameras have inbuilt GPS and photos can carry coordinates of where the animals are sighted? Yes, it absolutely is. Mine doesn't. I plot where I am using the Sea Watcher app, so I can tell from the time that I took the picture where I was, because I've kind of got a record from that of where I was, at least roughly. However, yes, some cameras have a built-in GPS, but that's an extra, which is going to cost you more money. But if you are serious about wanting to do the ID work and sort of really get involved in knowing exactly where you were when you took all of your pictures and tagging those in your posts and all of that sort of thing, that's certainly something to look for. However, SLRs and any of the good bridge cameras that have a hot shoe on the top, certainly SLRs and probably some of the bridge cameras, but I don't take this as gospel, but certainly with my SLR, you can plug a GPS unit onto the top of the camera and plug it into the camera to add that feature later if you don't have it. But again, not all cameras would be able to do that. Right, Stuart Baxter, related question, but binoculars rather than cameras. There are various magnification levels and options out there. What would you say is best for whale watching on land? Again, this is a whole other debate, and there's as many answers to this as there are questions, really. First of all, brands, just very quickly before we look at the various levels. If you want a good pair of binoculars, you do need to look really at a good brand. And it is true, generally speaking, the more money you spend, the better quality binoculars you're going to get. So we had our prize at the beginning of the week from Opticron, who makes some very good binoculars. Swarovski, for example, are very, very popular with bird watchers and things. Chris and I have Nikon binoculars mainly, but I also have Steiner boating binoculars, which have a built-in compass, which is very useful, and they're typically used by mariners and things. So if you're on land and weight isn't too much of an option, a nice pair of 7x50 or even 10x50 fairly chunky binoculars of the sort that are used by boaters, that's what I use on land. I can't remember what brand the ones I have at the moment are, but there's a lot of them out there. Have a look at the boat chandlers and things. And the nice thing with those is, as I say, they do have some of them you can buy with a compass built in, which is really handy when you're trying to get bearings to a sighting, because you've got it in your viewfinder. So my personal tip for land watching is to use boating ones. I have an expensive pair of lighter weight Steiner boating binoculars, which are, I think they're 8x35s from memory, but something of that sort. And again, they have a built-in compass, and they're a bit lighter weight than the really big ship's ones. So some things, I mean, 7x50 is a kind of standard. If you go much above 10 times magnification with binoculars, you're losing the wider field of view that you get with some others. So probably 10 times magnification is probably the sweet spot from my point of view, I would argue. But as I say, I do use 7 and 8 times magnification ones because I quite like the wider field of view rather than the really close in zoom. Helen Clyment's asking the same thing. Can we get some similar info on binoculars? I'll see if I can drop that in for another evening, because I'm fishing just a little bit to remember all of the details of what I've got. So I'll pick them out, but certainly Chris's Nikon and Leica ones are excellent, and their one pair is 8 times magnification, the other pair is 10 times, and I think the new ones she's got are actually 12 times, and 35, 40, 50. However, a bit like with the cameras, you can end up getting some very heavy binoculars and leaving them behind. So a really nice pair of lightweight ones, rather like the Opticon ones we had at the beginning of the week, are a fabulous option because you'll have them with you. It's much less likely that you'll have them with you if you've got really big heavy ones to carry everywhere. And Hannah, who's our wonderful behind the scenes manager of all of this going on, has told Stuart and Helen that we'll try and have a focus on binoculars tomorrow. Hannah, thank you for that one. Okay, let's have a quick look. Are there any more orca questions? Right, a question from Joe. It's a very good question, Joe. She says, I'm new to all of this and I really enjoy learning about them, but I read in a magazine that killer whales aren't actually whales. Is that really right? Well, yes and no is the answer to that one. First of all, porpoises, dolphins and whales are all whales, because actually they're divided scientifically into toothed whales and baleen whales, and the toothed whales include big things like the sperm whales, quite big things like the orca, slightly smaller things like the dolphins, and slightly smaller things like the porpoises. So that's one answer. Actually, all dolphins and porpoises are actually toothed whales, scientifically speaking. So that's answer one. Answer two, though, is yes, also quite right. Killer whales are actually the largest member of the dolphin family. So they're a toothed whale, as we've just defined, but they are technically a dolphin, if you like, and not a whale within that larger grouping. So they're just a big dolphin, basically. Okay, right. Earlier today, we had a question from Barbara, and Barbara wondered if anybody heard a very loud boom, quarry workings or a sonic boom or something. Not entirely sure exactly what it was, but she was out at Strathy, and just after midday, there was a loud boom. So Barbara wondered if anybody else heard it, and if you did, let us know in the chat or get in touch with it later. And there was a sort of supplementary question around that, is would it harm the whales and dolphins? Well, loud noises, yes, can harm whales and dolphins, particularly if it's very close to, but that's predominantly really loud noises actually in the water. So the noise of really low frequency sonars, high powered drilling, underwater explosions, that kind of thing. Sound travels a lot faster in water. And there's a lot of evidence of beaked whales, for example, being harmed by military sonars, actually rupturing organs and eardrums and so on. So a loud noise in the air would likely be heard by cetaceans in the area, but is not likely to do them any great harm. If it was in the water or on the surface of the water even, and therefore transmitted hard into the water, and then whales in the vicinity, dolphins in the vicinity would be hurt, but probably not. Okay, our director Peter Evans has just popped in as well. He's out there listening, of course, all the time, and he could also deal with the question on binoculars as well. So not sure he did. I saw his email pop up, but either tomorrow or when he's with us on Saturday, we'll get Peter to deal with that one as well. And Peter can probably give you his personal view on camera equipment too. It is as I say, binocular and camera gear is a very personal choice. I've given you my personal preference for binoculars, but I could give you a more detailed answer if I'd had time to kind of think it through. I can't remember, unfortunately, exactly what it is that Chris has got. But as I say, for mine, my standard one are 8x50 shipboard style binoculars for use on land because they're very, very clear. I'm just looking, I'm not seeing any more questions. I think we've covered all of the questions I know about. Maybe a very quick look and just see if there's anything in the chat here. No. Okay, there is, Kiara has just sent me a message. Kiara, our sightings officer, this is a useful tip. Thank you very much for this one, Kiara. If you have a look at the Sea-Watch Foundation website, there is a feature on there written by one of the volunteers, how to improve your cetacean photography. So if you put a hyphen between it, if you go to seawatchfoundation.org.uk, if you can't find the link actually on the website, we'll try and put it up at a later date. But if you go to seawatchfoundation.org.uk / and then how to improve your cetacean photography with a hyphen between each word, it will bring up that article. And that would be perhaps a useful thing for a few people to have a look at. So thank you for that heads up, Kiara. I think we've dealt with all of the questions that we can do for tonight. So thank you very much for those very interesting questions. Hope that's been of some help. And as Hugh said, as Steve said, I will offer that same thing myself. If you want to ask further questions on that, I'm quite happy to help you to make that choice. But ultimately, it is a very personal choice, as we've said. So a big thank you for the questions. I hope we will see you tomorrow for Orca Watch Live. We'll try and answer some more of those questions. We hope to have some more things to see. And let's finish as usual by saying thank you to all our contributors this evening. Thank you to the behind the scenes team. And let's say thank you to all of our supporters and sponsors. From me, it's good night.